Good morning, everyone. I hope your day is going well. I saw the Backrooms movie over this weekend, and now I'm going to tell you about it. If this is your first time here, hello! I'm very glad that you decided to drop by. My channel is usually focused on in-depth story and media analysis, but for newer releases like this one, I like to do a more casual, off-the-cuff review. The next few minutes will be spoiler-free as I ramble about various aspects of the film in a somewhat unscripted way, and at the end we'll have a spoiler section where I get into things in more detail. If you like what I'm talking about and want to see more, I have a recent video analyzing the Backrooms YouTube series and a ton of other videos just waiting to be watched. And I suggest you subscribe while looking at them because I have some pretty big plans for videos coming up. I'm not gonna say what the exact schedule is because that's for patrons, but just know that the upcoming month and a half are going to be very busy, and I think you're gonna want to be here for it. Just as a reminder, if you've seen the movie and you want to talk about it in the comments, please make sure to mark your spoilers. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the movie, but let's just try and be courteous to those who haven't seen it yet. And with all that said, I think it's time to get to the review. Grab some water, your favorite flavor of cloud bread, and get comfortable. Let's talk about the Backrooms movie. Hello, and welcome to the rest of the video. As I said, this will be divided into separate sections, and the first that we'll be talking about is how does the film look overall, in terms of cinematography, production design, special effects, etc. In my opinion, the movie looks very good. I think it is very competently shot, and it has a sense of its own style that I think is very unique and very enjoyable to watch. I also really loved the special effects that were present in the movie. I thought they were very well done, and they fit the world and didn't look out of place, if that makes sense. Something I appreciated about the filmmaking was that a lot of these shots, especially in the Backrooms, felt designed and framed so that it felt like there should be something behind a character. Like the way it was framed, you were just waiting for whatever it was to show up in the frame, but a lot of the time it never did. And I don't know, that created a sense of eeriness and tension that I thought was really interesting and I really liked. And another thing that was often done cinematography-wise was that shots, even in the real world, they all felt a little bit liminal and weird. A lot of these shots just felt like the world wasn't quite right. There was something wrong with it. The movie overall is very dreamlike in the way that it presents itself, and I think that's an intentional artistic choice that serves the movie pretty well. Something that people probably know about this movie is that the Backrooms were actually physically built. They built, I believe, 30,000 square feet of set for this so that they could actually go and get lost in it. And I think that was a really excellent choice. Like, I'm sure they could have split it into different sections, different sound stages, but I think having it all as one physical space really aided the movie and the feel that it was going for. Because in the Backrooms YouTube series, you don't really get a lot of, like you get it sometimes, but a lot of the physicality with the characters is hard to portray because you're seeing it from their viewpoint because they're often carrying a camera. But in this movie, you see the characters, they touch the walls a lot. They're able to interact with a lot of things in a way that's a lot more obvious, and it makes the Backrooms feel more real. And because of that, it feels even more weird because you can tell that, like, it's real in here, and that makes the weird parts of it stand out even more. And yeah, I like that they went that extra mile to really make it feel uncanny in that way. And that was something that I really liked about it. This movie looks very good. I wasn't really paying attention to things like wardrobe design and stuff like that, but I mean, maybe it's a little mean to say, but maybe the fact that I didn't notice is an indication that they were doing a good job, if that makes sense, because there's kind of an invisible art to wardrobe design. If I were to see the movie again, that's something I'd probably try and pay attention to. attention to, because I like to do that with little details in a movie. But as far as I can remember, that was also very good. Just in general, I think everyone working on this movie did a very good job with it. Special effects, as I mentioned, I thought they were very good. This is shown in trailers, so I feel okay talking about it, but the effect where people are going through the wall to get into the backrooms, I think is really cool. Like, they do some fun stuff with it, and I think it came out really nicely. Like, me and my husband were talking a little bit about how it was done, and it's probably very simple in practice. Like, there's not actually anything there, and then they add it in post, but, like, they made it look like it was there, if that makes sense. Like, that's partially effects, partially the portrayal of the actors, but it was really good either way. I enjoyed that. And I don't have a specific section for this, so I'm just going to mention it here. But I think the sound design in this movie is really, really cool. Like, I think some people might find it kind of overbearing at certain points, but I thought it was really, really creative and unique in what it decided to do, and it really matches the distinct style that this movie is going for. And yeah, overall, I just thought this movie looked really good. And next on the docket, we're going to be talking a bit about the plot. Again, this is going to be spoiler-free, but I'm going to go over, like, the general, like, not what happens, but, like, how I felt about what happened, if that makes sense, without actually talking about events in particular. I thought the story overall was pretty good. I didn't think it was perfect, which I'll get into like a tiny bit more, but I did really enjoy it, and I felt really intrigued and invested all throughout the movie. I wanted to know what was gonna happen and what was going on, and it kept me engaged, if that makes sense. One thing I will say that I think will probably not come as a surprise, and I think other people have said, is that this does feel a little bit like a long YouTube video. Like, it makes perfect sense that it is that way because of Kane Parsons' background, but it's a little bit difficult to articulate why it feels that way, but, like, it does feel like it's a bit of a long YouTube video, which I don't think is bad. I think this is a very well-constructed story. It's a full story from start to finish, and it's good. I liked it a lot, but it does, like, have a slightly different vibe than your traditional Hollywood movie. Yeah, it's just something that you can kind of feel, even if I can't really describe it very well. Something that I will mention is that although this is a complete story, it feels like the movie could have been like 15-20 minutes longer, and that would have made it a little bit stronger in the long run. Because this is something, I'm stealing this analogy from my husband because we were talking about the movie. You know that meme where it's like, oh, you want some steak with that sauce? And it's the idea of, like, you put on so much sauce on the steak, you can't taste the meat. And it's the idea of, like, you put on so much sauce on the steak, you can't taste the meat. This movie's, like, kind of the opposite, where it's like, I like my steak, but I want a little more sauce with it. Where it's like, the base of this movie, like, the core elements, they're really good. They're really, like, juicy and delicious. But, but, like, it's, like, I felt like I wanted just a little more pizzazz. Like, just a little bit more something to zhuzh it up a little bit. I know this is incredibly vague, but it's, yeah, it's just like I said, an extra 15-20 minutes would have helped a lot with just fleshing out a couple of things a little bit more and just doing a few more, I don't know, set pieces, I suppose. Yeah, like, this is very solid, especially for, like, a first movie by someone who's never done it before. Like, very solid, very, very good. But I think it needed just a little more sauce to be called a great movie. And this is kind of present in the themes of the movie. Like, the story and plot, I think that's totally fine. The events that happen are fine, and I enjoyed them, and it was super awesome. But when it comes to, like, I guess the lessons or the ideas you want to take away from the movie, it doesn't quite stick the landing for me. I don't want to discourage anyone from going to see the movie. I think you absolutely should, and come to your own conclusions. And it's a good time. Like, it's a great time overall. But when it came to what the film was trying to say, like, it clearly had ideas and things that it wanted to say, but I think it didn't quite stick the landing on making it hit as well as it could have. And yeah, just like an extra few minutes could have helped a lot, just like a tiny bit more polish. It needed just like a tiny bit more sauce. Like, I guess that's the best way that I can describe it, which I already did. And connected to the plot, we'll be talking just a little bit about characters. I think these characters are played very well. Chiwetel Ejiofor and, hang on, I'm going to pause to look up her name, because I should say her name. Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renee Rossve, I believe is how you say it. I'm sorry if that's wrong. They both did a very good job. There are other characters in this film, but they're the two main ones, and I think they did a very good job at portraying their characters. They were both really compelling, and I loved watching them and seeing them go through what they go through in the movie. I thought they were very compelling, and I was drawn in. I wanted to know more about them. Connected to what I just said about the, like, plot of the movie, Mary's arc, Mary is the name of the therapist character. Mary's arc felt just a little bit unfinished. Like, it technically comes to a conclusion, but I think the film could have done a bit more to make the conclusion more solid. It's another one of the sauce things, you know, where the stuff is there, it just doesn't quite solidify in a way that I think it should. It could have been just a little bit stronger, a little bit more conclusive when it came to that. I think your own mileage might vary. You might think that's just totally fine and whatever, and that's your own purview, but I would have liked just a little bit more finality, and like the movie was really saying something with the way that her arc ended. But this section is really hard for me because I really like character analysis, and it's kind of killing me that I can't go into full detail about why I think what I think. But if you've seen the movie, you can hear some of that in the spoilers section. And overall, I think the performances were all very good. These are nuanced characters that have a lot of different sides to them. And yeah, I'd recommend going and watching them and seeing what you think. This next section is titled, "Did you need a master's degree in Backrooms lore to understand what was happening?" And this one is kind of interesting to answer. I have a little bit of a hard time just uncritically saying that yes, it did, because I think it's kind of hard to judge if something is okay for beginners in a franchise. If you're already in that fan base and a fan of it, like, you have a lot of intrinsic knowledge that you might not realize, and it's just hard to gauge. But in my humble opinion, I do think this is mostly okay for people who don't know about the Backrooms. Because the characters aren't familiar with the world, the movie does a good job of introducing us to the concepts the same way the characters are introduced to it. So that kind of allows the movie to present its exposition in a way that feels a bit more natural. And at one point they do kind of explain what's going on in a more of a world-buildy lore type of way. But because of the setup of the scene, it doesn't really feel like an exposition dump. I think it's pretty well done. One thing that I didn't like as much was that it kind of feels like it's saving its answers for later. Like, when it's a YouTube series, you always have the next video that you're going to be watching, so it's fine to leave a lot more things ambiguous and vague. But when it comes to a full movie experience, I feel like you need to explain yourself a little bit more, if that makes sense. And it felt like this was purposefully saving things to be explained in a later installment, like a later movie or maybe a limited series like Kane Parsons has talked about. And I think maybe that's not the best. I think a general audience would have appreciated some more explanation for small things. Like a lot of this movie, this isn't like a huge problem that permeates the entire film. Most of the big questions get answers, but there are some smaller details that are kind of confusing and ambiguous, and some of them I think are totally fine. Others I think I would have preferred to have a more clear answer about what exactly was going on. But yeah, overall for this section, I can confidently say that you do not need a master's degree in Backrooms lore to understand what's happening in this movie. And of course, a big question I think people will be wondering is this movie scary? When I first saw that it had an R rating, I wasn't really sure what to think because I honestly wasn't sure what you could put in there to get an R rating, and now that I've seen it, I understand. Yeah, it's not overly gratuitous in any of the things it does, but there is some blood, there is some gore, stuff like that, and overall I think it is scary in its own way. And like the rest of this movie, it's scary in a somewhat unique way. I talk about this, I'm actually very excited because I talk about this in my previous video on the Backrooms, where going into this movie, I was wondering if this was going to be more of a liminal, abstract type of horror, or if it was just gonna turn into more of a monster movie. And in my recent video, I talk about the same thing, where I think Kane is able to use his monsters in a very unique way, where they function more as extensions of the Backrooms as a place, rather than just a scary monster in a scary location. And I was wondering if they'd be able to pull off that same balance with the movie, and I'm very happy to say that I think they did. The monsters within this movie, like I just said, they function as an extension of the concept of the Backrooms, and all that implies. I think they did a very good job of combining the fact that there are scary monsters that are scary because they look scary, as well as the implications of what they represent within this world. It was able to combine that in a way that is very Backrooms, and it is very, very good. I think maybe it's slightly more monsters focused than the series as a whole, but I think that's down to the fact that this is a movie and it helps to have something more, I guess, solid as a climax. But yeah, that's maybe getting into spoiler territory, but overall I think this movie is very good at being scary, but it's a more unique type of scary, and the first half of the movie doesn't do as much. There's implications, but it's not until the second half of the movie that things really pick up and things really start getting a little bit crazy. So I guess technically it's a slow burn. But overall, what I wanted to say is I think this is very scary in a very Backrooms way, and I think that makes me very happy. I do want to mention that I wish we had a tiny bit more time in the Backrooms, which I feel a little weird saying that because I can imagine from a writing perspective how difficult it would be to write a movie like this, because you have the Backrooms, but you don't want to be in there so often that the audience gets used to the idea of the Backrooms. And as much as 30,000 square feet, that's a lot, right? But you don't necessarily want to explore every inch of it by the time the movie's over. So I can definitely understand, and I very much know that we couldn't have spent the entirety of the movie in the Backrooms, but it's just a little bit of a feeling where I feel like we could have done a little bit more with being in the Backrooms physically. It didn't need to be a lot, maybe just a scene or two, and like I said, this movie could have been a little bit longer, so I don't think you would have lost anything by having just a couple more scenes within the Backrooms themselves. And as an extension of this point about whether or not it's scary, something I did for my Iron Lung review is I gave some warnings for things that I thought people might appreciate a warning about if they're sensitive to certain things. Obviously, I can't remember everything, but off the top of my head, as I mentioned, this movie has some gore in it. There's not a lot of straight up blood except for one scene, but the blood is present because injuries and stuff like that happen. This one is kind of weird, but technically there's cannibalism. Just technically there's cannibalism. There's potentially a flashing lights warning. I can't think of any really specific scenes where the light flashing was obnoxious or it happened for a long time, but because it's the Backrooms and there's a big focus on the fluorescent lighting of the space, I think if you have epilepsy or you're sensitive or you get migraines or something like that, that might be something to watch out for. And the movie as a whole is it's not necessarily trippy, but it's definitely dreamlike in its presentation. Some things that, I don't want to say that things are told out of order, but it's a bit ethereal, a bit liminal, a bit dreamlike. So, I don't know. If that's something you don't like, I guess, then watch out for that. I feel like I'm missing the proper vocabulary words to describe what this is doing. If I remember it, I'll put it in text on the screen right now. But yeah, off the top of my head, I think those are the only things noteworthy to talk about. I guess if I remember more, I'll put it in text on the screen right now as well. Getting into the final big questions of the spoiler-free section is this a good Backrooms movie, and is this just a good movie overall? I think it's a very good Backrooms movie, at least as far as it's representing the Backrooms that Kane Pixels / Parsons has created. I think it does a very good job at doing what it does best, which is combining that liminal feeling with some more physical threats in the form of the monsters. I think it does a pretty good job of expanding the lore while also being something you can just consume on its own. I have my little quibbles with it here and there, but overall I think it's a very good experience. And that opinion extends to it being just a good movie overall. I wouldn't say it's the greatest movie of all time, per se. There are a couple things that just get to me just a little bit that I think could have been improved. But I think for a first movie made by someone who's never done this before, it's very, very good and very, very admirable. And as always, I want to encourage you guys to go see it. And if you have seen it, tell me about it in the comments because I want to talk about it. Because there's a lot going on here. If I had to give it a number scoring, I think I'd give it like a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10. And I think that's pretty good for someone's first outing as a director. And I hope that Kane can keep making movies or series or YouTube videos or whatever he wants to be making. And if this is where we part ways, thank you very much for watching this video. But if you're here for spoilers, we're gonna start that section right about now. Hello, welcome to the spoilers section. This is going to be even less organized than the previous section because I'm just assuming you've seen the movie already and I'm not gonna explain things, I'm just gonna talk about stuff. So here we go. A couple of points I made in this video, I was thinking about something really specific when I made that point, so I'm going to expand on that a little here. When I talk about shots being or feeling liminal even outside of the Backrooms, the one I was thinking of specifically is there are multiple shots where people are framed with basically just the sky behind them, and it looks just a little bit weird. The one that I'm thinking of even more specifically is where young Mary is with her mom and they're making the little handprints in the driveway. And as they're doing that, it's shot from below and we're looking up at them and we see that there's like, I forget what it's called, the big construction machine just has a bunch of wreckage in its claws and it looks like it's about to drop it on them. And then we cut to a shot from another angle and we realize that this is kind of a pseudo flashback from Mary's perspective. And I thought that was a really cool artistic choice because it looks off-putting, it looks weird, we don't really know what's happening. It's, I think, a little less liminal and more surreal in the way that it does things, but it's really, really cool. And there are a couple of shots like that that just stand out to me as like, that's a really cool thing you're doing with the framing of the shot and the way you decided to do it. And I just thought that was really cool. And like, when it comes to other liminal spaces, stuff like where Kat and Bobby live, that kind of, I think they're like apartment complex things, but it also looks kind of like a motel. they might be living out of a motel. I'm not really sure. But that area, it feels a little weird. And it's interesting because I guess it's technically period accurate to when things take place, but it also just looks a little bit off-putting and surreal and weird. And like, I really like that. And that's down to both cinematography and set design. So big props to everyone who was involved in that. I think it really lends to the movie's feel. And this is something that Backrooms has experimented with before, of like, even if you're technically in the real world, still making it kind of feel like the Backrooms, which helps to support the idea that the Backrooms is just an extension of reality that's remembering itself wrong. It's really cool. I like it a lot. The specific moment that I was talking about when I mentioned sound design is when Mary is first entering the Backrooms, because there's a really cool moment where throughout the whole scene, Mary is very unlike Clark. She's not someone who's just gonna like, I guess Clark technically falls in by accident the first time, but basically she is not really gonna go through this wall until she sees like the fly do it or whatever. And throughout this, there's a bunch of really interesting sound design with like the sound effects where she sticks part of her hand in, and then you kind of hear something in the background that sounds like her panicking heartbeat. And then as she's like gearing up and making the decision to fully enter the Backrooms, the sound effects of the Backrooms and the soundtrack and that heartbeat sound combine in a way that just gets louder and louder and more overbearing, and it just gets louder and louder and louder to the tune of that beating heart until eventually she crosses the threshold and it just like it's just quiet. And it was so cool to experience in theaters because you could almost feel the sounds of it, and then she's in the Backrooms and it's just and that was really cool. It just and that was the most obvious moment that comes to mind. Like, that really stuck with me as a cool sound design moment. But a lot of the sound design in this is really cool. Sometimes it's difficult to tell when a sound is supposed to be diegetic and when it's not. Like in one scene where Clark is like driving around and he drives to his old house and he's listening to Mary's audiobook, it's kind of implied that he's diegetically listening to it, but it's also just like weird about the passage of time and what's actually happening. So you're not sure if he actually is listening to that audiobook. And so in some ways, like, part of me wants it to be clearer about if stuff is actually happening, but I also think it was an intentional artistic decision, so I don't want to say like, oh, they shouldn't have done that. But overall, I just think it was a really, the movie has such an identity and style of its own in nearly like every aspect, and it's really, really cool, and I like it a lot. And also, I don't know what's up with the wind chimes. There's wind chimes throughout, and I feel like they're supposed to be representative not just of like a location, but of an idea as well, because the sound effect of wind chimes it also shows up in found footage number 2, right? Like, it's a sound effect in that thing in in found footage number 2 at the end, when I believe at the end, when we see that this was being played on a television in someone's home, we hear wind chimes in the background. And then at the start of this movie, we hear wind chimes when the async worker is trying to get away. Like, he hears wind chimes above him and he's like, what is that? And then there are wind chimes in the basement, and there's a whole bunch of like wind chimes in the, like, as, not Grace, her name's not Grace. As Mary is running away from Captain Clark, she runs into a whole bunch of wind chimes. Like the wind chimes represent something, I feel, that's not merely like physical. It's kind of like, I don't know, the simplest way I can explain it is like in one of those old Disney shorts where it's like the voices of different animals are the instruments. So like, the wolf is like the deep bass sound in the soundtrack, and the bird or mouse or whatever it is that's trying to get away is like a piccolo or something, where it's like, I feel like the wind chimes, they represent a theme or an idea or a specific thing that's happening, and I don't know what it is yet. I can't figure out what exactly, it means when the sound of wind chimes comes up, but I feel like it means something, and it's low-key kind of driving me crazy, so I don't know. I'm gonna be paying attention to wind chimes in the upcoming series, whether it's on YouTube or somewhere else. Like, I'm gonna be paying attention. Something I also wanted to expand on a little more that I mentioned in the earlier review is Mary's unfinished character arc, because like, it's not bad. Like, the problem is, I can feel that the movie is reaching for something specific with her character arc, and I think I know what it's trying to say, but it doesn't quite hit it just right. Because here's the thing, throughout the movie, a consistent theme and motif that is constantly brought up, both by Clark and Mary, like this is established in the first scene when they're talking in the therapy, well, technically not the first scene, but you know what I mean, the first scene in the real world where it's Mary and Clark, and she's like, hey, you have like specific patterns and cycles in your life, do you want to forge a new path? And Clark is like, oh, I'm here, aren't I? Where that's establishing like, hey, there's a motif of like, you go through the same things over and over in life, and that keeps going, and it kind of shows that like maybe Mary isn't following her own advice because she has her childhood home that's been wrecked, but she keeps that piece, and like clearly this was like a traumatic place for her, even before we find out that her mom may have had some mental issues and like kept her locked inside for like, because she was paranoid about what was outside. Even before that, just from the filmmaking, we get the implication that this isn't necessarily a happy place for Mary, and yet she has that piece of the driveway, she has that piece of her childhood that she keeps with her, and even like carries with her. Like, it's not just something she keeps on her desk or in her house on a shelf. Like, we see, and it's implied, and we get confirmation later that she carries it with her everywhere. So it's like she's carrying that piece of childhood trauma with her, right? She's in this pattern, she's in this cycle, and this is reinforced as well with the Backrooms, where it's said that like the Backrooms are essentially a place that's trying to remember the past, and it just keeps doing that, and it gets things wrong, and it gets more twisted as time goes on. So clearly the movie's setting something up where it's like, hey, being in these patterns and in these cycles is not good, because it gets more and more warped and sideways and just off, and it's not good for you, right? Like, Clark wanting to stay in the Backrooms is a bad thing. He's like, I don't want to change, so I'm gonna stay here in this place of endless patterns and endless cycles and stuff like that. And I feel like what the movie's trying to say is that that is not good, and you should try and break out of it. But Mary doesn't really get the opportunity to express that sentiment for herself and express that that's something like that she thinks is possible. She talks about like kind of that it's something she wants to do, but it's kind of said in a way where she doesn't think it's possible to break out of that pattern or to help others do the same. Like in the, I guess, pseudo-therapy session in the Backrooms where Clark has gone fully off the rails and he's like trying to do this therapy thing, and eventually she's like you don't have to change type thing. And then she says something like, I can't save anyone. And I think to an extent that's herself as well, because as we've seen, she's stuck in that same mindset. She's trying to figure out how to be and how to exist, but she's stuck. And then symbolically, she breaks free, because she uses that piece of her childhood trauma to literally bash Captain Clark on the head until it breaks into pieces. So symbolically, she has broken that part of her past, right? Like, she's destroyed it, and she can't have it with her anymore. But the movie doesn't really allow her to sit in that and figure out what that means for her own view on life. And you could read this as it being somewhat of a hopeless thing, where Mary as a character sees this as like, without this one pattern, I am lost, and that's why she disassociates at the end. But the movie doesn't really double down on things being hopeless and patterns being inescapable, And it also doesn't give Mary the opportunity to see that she's broken out of this pattern and face it and say, okay, I'm scared and freaking out, but I'm gonna continue forward anyway and keep trying, even if I'm not sure it's possible. I want to keep trying. Like, it doesn't really go either way with it. So it feels like the ending, even with all this wonderful setup, it doesn't really know what it wants to say for itself. And I think that's a shame, because there's a lot of strong setup, but through Mary and the way that she's acting and her character arc, the ending of that could have been a way for the movie to say, like, it could have said, trying to break out of these patterns is hopeless, or it could have said, Mary thinks it's hopeless, but it actually isn't. Or it could have said, now that Mary's been forced out of her normal pattern, she's going to try and forge a new one, like she's been saying to her patients, but not actually doing this whole time. I prefer that last one, personally, but whatever the movie wanted to do, it could have done. But I feel like it was just a bit too vague and a bit too focused on, like, keeping that ambiguity, and I think that lessened the impact of the themes of the movie, and I think that's a shame. I would have liked it to pick a direction for its theming and what it wanted to say with this idea of patterns and cycles and breaking cycles and things like that. And so, yeah, I think I went on that point maybe a little longer than I meant to, but it really does get to me a little bit. Like I said, I like the idea of this being, like, the thought of not necessarily a way to defeat the Backrooms, but the idea of being stuck in a cycle and you can break out of it even if it's hard. I like that as the message of the movie, and the way that I would have integrated a message like that would have been maybe where Phil at the end talks about going into the Backrooms every day and trying to find something new. He could have said something like, I feel like I'm stuck in a loop where I just keep trying and trying but not learning anything. And Mary notices that, and she's kind of like, oh, you feel like you're stuck. And he's like, oh yeah, like, I feel like I'm stuck and I just can't get out of it, and I'm trying and trying. And that kind of, like, snaps her out of her shock a little bit, and maybe she has, like, some doubts on her face and some uncertainty about if she'll be able to help. But in seeing that, like, he's in that same situation, she decides, and, like, thinking about the fact that this, like, rock, that this piece of her childhood she carried with her is now broken, and, like, essentially that could be a symbol of her trying to break free from what has happened. She could then say, like, rally herself a little bit and say, like, oh, what do you want to know? And maybe that doesn't fully fit the vision that Kane had, but I feel like there should have been some opportunity for her to explore and express her own feelings more about what happened and how she feels about it. And by an extension of that would be the filmmaker's way of telling the audience that, like, this is the message of the movie. I know, like, maybe you assume that, like, the film doesn't need to have a message, but with how much it sets up, I think it would have been a bit stronger, and it would have given the themes of the film more weight if Mary was allowed to extrapolate a little bit and come to a conclusion on what she wanted to do going forward. And so that's why I think that her arc is just a little bit unfinished. I feel like she should have been allowed to come to some conclusion, or at least express her feelings a little bit, rather than just have the symbolic gesture and then nothing else afterward, because she could feel any sort of way about what happened and the loss of something that I don't know if I can say that she cares about it a lot, but it's certainly something that she carries, and losing that, and by extension, like, trying to break free of what she's been stuck in. Like, you guys get it. I don't have to keep explaining myself. You guys get it. Something that I am wondering about is if the movie characters will end up appearing in the YouTube series. I don't know exactly how copyright is gonna work for this, but I wonder, because with stuff like character likeness, there are licenses you can have and things you need to do, and they were probably only contracted for the movie. So what I'm getting at is that we maybe won't get to see them again in the YouTube series, which makes the slightly weak end of Mary's arc even more disappointing to me, because there's a real chance that we just won't get to see her grow. And like, maybe she's like Clark, right? Maybe she wouldn't have wanted to change. Maybe she just wants to go back to her life of eating TV dinners and whatever. But like, we don't get to see if that's the case. And yeah, with the idea in my head that maybe we won't get to see them again, I think that I would have liked just a bit of a stronger ending. And like, I would have liked an implication of what she's gonna do, you know? I'm also a little bit confused about what the lore reveals mean for the series, like the wider series. Like, I've just written down a bunch of questions here, and I'm gonna kind of read them out. Let me just, like, can you always eat these monsters, or is the couch stuffing situation that Clark talks about and demonstrates just specific to his section of the Backrooms? And when is a copy of a person made? Because we see Mary's copy at the end and she's wearing the clothes that Async gave her after her medical examination. By the way, I think the x-rays that we see are a medical examination of her. They probably wanted to check A, if she was real, and B, if she was about to die. Like if she had internal bleeding, they didn't want her to like die during the interrogation/interview thing. So yeah, like, we see that her copy in the Backrooms is wearing those clothes, and I've seen some people say that, like, when people enter the Backrooms, that's when their copy is made, but that doesn't make sense for Mary because she's wearing those different clothes, and that doesn't make sense for Clark either, because he's not wearing that costume when he enters the Backrooms, and then, like, the people that he has in his little, like, home setup at the end, did they enter the Backrooms wearing those clothes? Like, I don't know if it's when you enter the Backrooms, and if it's not that, then when exactly does that happen? Like, when exactly does the Backrooms try and copy a person? And that's something I think is a little bit important to know. And another thing is, why are specific ones aggressive and other ones not? I think that's also important to know. And it might be as simple as, like, your personality in life, and especially angry people become especially aggressive and angry copies in the Backrooms, but that also feels like a little bit loosey-goosey. I'd like something maybe a little more concrete regarding that. And, like, I saw something I'm confused about is, like, are these copies of people different than the wire monsters who are, like, bacteria? Because they feel different, but could they be a later evolution of the same being? And a lot of these questions, it's like, technically, you might think it's not really important, right? And technically it's not. But I feel like knowing these things helps to shape the audience's expectations of your world. Like, I don't think setting up rules for a mysterious and ambiguous world is a bad thing, right? Because if you set up no rules, then you can kind of do whatever you want, and eventually that makes it so there's not any stakes because the writer can just do whatever they want, right? And, like, obviously you don't want to set in, like, hard rules for everything because you want some freedom, but right now I feel like maybe the Backrooms movie is, like, and honestly the Backrooms series is maybe just a little too loose with its rules, except I think the real thing that's happening is it's not that loose and we just don't have the information to know what the rules are, and I feel like maybe that should be conveyed a little more clearly. I know the aesthetic of the Backrooms is that it's very mysterious and things are told out of order and lore is very fragmented, right? But I think having some clarity on mysteries like this is really important, and I just hope we get some clear answers in the future, because I think it would help us to understand, one, exactly how much danger our characters are in, two, if there's a danger of them coming to the real world, like, just, it would help with some things, I feel. And these questions I have, like I said, they technically aren't that important, technically, because, like, the result is the same either way, right? Like, you get a scary moment, and maybe it doesn't matter what the exact inner workings are, but I do think it's important because it affects your engagement and how you feel about certain things, and, like, if you're just confused about what exactly is happening, that kind of undercuts the other feelings that the series is trying to give you. And I don't think that it's always necessary or good that we don't know the exact details of things. Like when I was walking out of the theater, there were these two guys that walked past me, and they were talking about Bobby's death, right? And they were saying like, okay, well, what ended up killing Bobby? And one of them said, oh, I think it was Captain Clark, right? And that works. It could have been Captain Clark collecting these things. But my husband thought that it was a different entity. Like, he assumed that this was a different situation, and the first time that Captain Clark and real world Clark meet is after Captain Clark picks up that camera, right? And it's like, technically for the story, you don't have to know which is which, right? Like, either way, Bobby is dead, they're in a scary situation, and Kat ends up dying too, somehow. Like, maybe this is just down to an opinions thing, but I want that extra clarification because I think it is helpful to the story and the specific emotions you're trying to tell if it's implied that Captain Clark has been here for a while and is doing this and made this like nest of clothes and dead body parts, or if it's just a completely separate danger that's unrelated to Clark's neuroses, you know? Like, I think that would be like very good to know. And yeah, I feel like I'm rambling. This is, like, I think my own opinion, so I'll just move on a little bit from this. But anyway, another thing that I mentioned is I feel like there could have been a little more backrooms. And like I said, I don't feel, like, super comfortable or, like, stable saying that, because, like, where would you have put it, right? But I think the movie could have been just a little bit longer. And maybe you could have had a scene where Clark actually shows them the pool that he's talking about when he's introducing them to the backrooms. Like, they could have extended that sequence a little more, where he ends up showing them a bit more of the backrooms. Because it's kind of weird that he specifically mentions it, but we don't end up seeing it. We do eventually end up seeing a pool, but we don't know if that's the one that he was talking about. And so I think it could have been a good way to see more of the backrooms as a viewer if he showed them all the things he'd discovered and then took them to the terrible laundry hole where Bobby ends up, like, kicking it. You know, like, we could have used that as a way to show that he's explored here and he's familiar with the layout in a way that these people aren't. And it kind of foreshadows that he's getting way more comfortable in the backrooms, like, to a weird degree that he just knows where things are. Like, I think that could have been cool. And I mostly bring this up because people don't really get lost in the backrooms, which I think is interesting. Like, people seem to just, like, accidentally bring themselves in circles to get back to where they need to go, which is very lucky for them, honestly. Like, extremely lucky that Clark even managed to get out of the backrooms on his first exploration of it. Like, the whole time I was watching it, I was like, oh, what? You're not even gonna, like, leave a trail of furniture? Like, you're not worried at all that you won't be able to get back? See, like, he is super stupid lucky that he didn't just end up stuck there and die. But anyway, yeah, I would have liked a little more of, like, people getting lost and not being able to find their way around, you know? Also, something that I just cannot get over is the fact that Bobby did not notice the head that's just in the laundry pile. Like, it's just so creepy, and it gets under your skin, and once you notice it, you can't stop looking at it, and you keep expecting it to move, because it's a horror movie, so it feels like it should, but it never moves. And, like, my husband brought up that maybe at some point he thought it was just gonna whisper, "Run!" which is terrifying, and I hate that. Sorry, I hope the noises conveyed how I feel about it. Like, it's just like, it's so unclear what's going on with it. Like, is it another entity? Is it just, like, part of a corpse? And, like, what is it doing here? It's so gross. I don't like it. But something I do like, and in fact love, is the twisted version of Clark, Captain Clark. I think he is so creepy and so cool and well designed, because he represents, like, Clark's worst impulses kind of overtaking him, which is represented by, like, the actual Clark getting eaten. Like, the worst parts of himself, the parts that, like, absolutely don't want to change, like, they get sick of him, and they eat him. And I loved, like, the, like, I don't know if you can call it foreshadowing, but the, like, little nod to what happens where Clark is like, oh, you know the best part? You can eat them. And then he gets eaten by a version of himself who apparently feels very similarly about the fact that you can eat these things, except in its eyes, these things are people in the Backrooms. So, yeah, like, I just loved that. It's very well designed, super creepy. There's one specific shot where as Mary is trying to escape from, I guess, the Backrooms version of the store, like, she, like, the camera, or, like, it goes over her shoulder, or, like, she turns around or something, and it's just standing there, and it kind of just, like, sits there for a while before it actually starts coming after her. Like, there's something so creepy about that, where it got to the top of the stairs, and it just watched her struggle for a while before actually moving. Like, that's so creepy. I love it. I love that. And also, this one's kind of weird, but I think there should be a new art trend where you draw the messed up version of yourself that exists in the Backrooms, and here is mine. Let me know what you think, and if you end up drawing one yourself, maybe tag me in it. I would love to see it, because I think this is fun, and like I said, I'm trying to start a trend here, because I think it'd be really cool. And I think that's probably all the things that I wanted to mention in the spoiler section. I think the spoiler section is probably longer than I meant it to be, but that's okay. I'm sure there's other things I'm forgetting. I only saw this in theaters, and it's probably not going to come out on streaming for a while. But yeah, I enjoyed just rambling about the spoiler parts of this, and I hope you guys did too. And I think we're ready for the outro now. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you had a good time. As I said at the start, this is a more casual video compared to my others, and if you're wanting something a little more structured, I highly recommend checking out the rest of my channel. I think there's a pretty good chance that you'll find something you like. And if you can't get enough of my beautiful voice, I also have a Twitch channel, where I'm live most Saturdays from 12 to 2 PDT. I'm usually just playing games casually and talking about video stuff, and I'd love it if you'd drop by and say hello. And I'd like to take this moment to thank all of my patrons, including, but not limited to, Perplexia Sphinx, Snick, Tree, Lurch18489, Sphinx, I May Be Dumb, and Puppet Wraith. Thank you all so much. Your continued support is part of what makes these videos possible, and I'm very grateful that it's something I get to experience. If you'd like to become a patron yourself and get exclusive updates, previews of video art, and much more, you can find the link in the description or just go to this website here. And thank you all once again for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I hope to see you all again soon. Bye!